Real quick, uh, your note about he didn't die on the operating table. I've always found it funny that we get these surgery updates and they are always the same. Surgery went well and they're expected to make a full recovery. You never get a tweet that says the surgery did not go as everyone hoped and this is going to be a long and arduous rehab. Similarly with like when you get like NFL offseason free agent visits, like DeAndre Hopkins visited the Patriots today, told the meeting was very productive. Two sides feel good and they'll circle back eventually. You never get like this meeting sucked and no shot. You know?
They want nothing to do with this
Yeah.
player.
So useless. Yeah, and to your point, Ben, about like how his impact won't the impact might not have a huge bearing. Like I don't think like even if they come back and win, I know some people will be like, wow, they're better than Tatum. The net rating better without Tatum. The net rating goes up. Like I won't think that's the case. I think a lot of times teams do get bumps from being without their best player and they kind of play inspired. And I think the Celtics also happen to be talented and deep enough to win without him. Title, no. But the series, like I still think they have a shot, but not a great shot just because the rest of the roster is so hurt. Um, so yeah, I mean, but overall, I mean, obviously it's a huge deal for the Celtics. But I think like my big thought on the or main sort of thought on the series is like for as much talk as there's going to be about the future of the Celtics and Tatum and maybe like the issues with Missoula ball, so to speak. Like I don't really think the series is all that complicated, or like I don't think there need to be that many hot takes. I think it's as simple as the Knicks are better than a lot of people gave them credit for. Brown and Porzingis aren't nearly close enough to 100%. And the Celtics style of play, whereas like I think there's enough evidence that it works. They won a title. They go in deep playoff runs. I'm not saying they should change up the way they play, but you know it is true that they leave themselves exposed to potentially shooting themselves out of a series. That's also true, and so I think you know those things tend to catch up to teams that aren't truly generational. You know, it's not a knock on the Celtics that they're not the dynasty Bulls, Lakers, or Warriors. They're still a very good team. It's just, you know, when you are dealing with multiple injuries to key players, whether they're like really out or they're just very limited, as is the case with Brown, Tatum, and maybe Holiday, and you're having a bad shooting series, you just hope those things don't all converge when you're facing, or you hope they all converge when you're facing like true second round fodder. And I think a lot of people thought the Knicks were that, but they very clearly aren't. So I just think like that's my take on the series. Like, I just don't think there's many hot takes to have about it in a vacuum, just because I think you know the Knicks are decent and the Celtics are like legitimately banged up in a way that really has a domino effect across the roster and the matchups.
Yeah, it's the health thing, I think, because I mean the Celtics waxed the Knicks in the regular season, and the Knicks, there were flaws with them all season long. I mean they really struggled to actually put it all together at the same time. I mean earlier in the season we were talking about if the Towns trade was like a massive mistake for the Knicks. So I think there is a level of like they are overperforming. We probably didn't give them enough credit for the overall talent. This is one of the most bizarre series I've witnessed because prior to Monday night, the Celtics had dominated like 10 of 12 quarters probably, and I felt no confidence that they would win the series just because of the backbreaking ways that they had lost. And I think that the losing Tatum now, I think does them in. It would not surprise me if they go quietly tonight and then that's that. And then you start looking to the offseason. I mean, when you have to start playing Horford more than Porzingis, Porzingis is not right. By his own admission, he's not right. And that is a massive change from last year. And so you've already lost Tatum. Your other star player, Jaylen Brown's Jaylen Brown, but Porzingis, who's supposed to be giving you more, is clearly not right. So you're having to lean on 38-year-old Al Horford. And then, if Drew Holiday is not actually right, which is a possibility, then you're leaning on a 34-year-old who's not right. And so who's going to step up to answer that question directly, Ben? It probably has to be like Pritchard. Like it has to be someone who can shoot because they're not going to change the way they operate now at this point. And so they need someone who's going to shoot the lights out of the building. And it's pretty much him and Hauser that are going to be left to do that. So
Hauser's also hurt.
that, right, who's also hurt. So they've boxed themselves in.
Yeah.
They everything was going through Tatum, and it's just like they were going to be hard, even with him. They were going to be hard pressed to come back from this, and now I see no way it's going to happen. They don't have the bodies. They don't have
To
the
answer
healthy
your
bodies.
to answer your original question, Ben, I think the um, who has the most to gain. I think I would want to say Shireman just because, but I don't think he's going to play, so I don't think it's gonna be him. But like in theory, if he got more run because Hauser's hurt and now Tatum's hurt, maybe he really pops. But the answer, I think, obviously is Jaylen Brown. I just don't have faith that he's going to be able to capitalize on it because of the state of his knee. But, like, you know, if the Celtics come back and win this series and they go all the way to the finals, it's probably because Jaylen Brown is incredible. So a lot of it's going to fall on him. They're not going to be carried by Derek White and Drew Holiday and Al Horford. It's going to have to be Jaylen Brown. And so, yeah, I guess galaxy brain way of looking at it is the Celtics have the most to gain because if Jaylen Brown takes advantage of it and plays incredibly well, or other players do, maybe it makes them easier to make some of those big trades in the offseason that everybody's talking about. You know what I mean? Like
That's like a
maybe
Kendrick
this is a way
Perkins
for
take.
Jaylen Brown
Who
to
has the most to
skyrocket
gain?
his.
I think the Celtics have the most to gain.
No, I'm
Yeah,
just saying
Cody
maybe
House.
they might have to make some big trades this offseason, and and the best case scenario for that is everybody's stock is really high. So I'm just saying, you know.
I mean, I don't know if Jaylen Brown wants to play so well that he gets himself traded.
I think he does. I
But
think there's always been an air of like he would rather go be a number one somewhere else. I don't know about.
he this, he needs to be saved from himself on that one.
I think the playoffs are about adjustments, and the Celtics, for whatever reason, have long almost taken pride in not making adjustments. That if things are not going well, you trust the process until the process comes back around in your favor again. And the Knicks have shown Towns is a perfect example. Like if you watch Tatum going off early in that game, it's not all Towns, but it's a lot of Towns. Like a lot of Towns going under screens on switches, and instead of making sure that you protect the 3-point line, a lot of Towns like not being in the right position. And Tibbs and the Knicks made those adjustments, and throughout the series, I think the defense at the end was at game 2, where the Celtics ran the same play on their final 2 meaningful possessions. And the Knicks, that wasn't Tibbs, that was the players on the court making those adjustments between one play that ended in a Tatum dunk and the next play ended in a Tatum turnover. And I think at this point, the Celtics and Joe Mazzulla, they're forced now to make some sort of adjustment. And it might not be a tactical adjustment, but there's got to be some sort of adjustment now, whether it's running more of the offense through Brown and Pritchard, whether it's utilizing Pritchard more often. There's got to be some sort of adjustment now. And I think that's why I think Mazzulla and Pritchard, in a way, have the most to gain in this, because I think the Celtics were playing so poorly overall. They were being so badly coached, which is a fact, that if they had won, this was going to be Tatum's this was going to be this was going to be like Dirk Nowitzki in 2011 level
Yeah.
effort if the Celtics won the championship this year, considering how injured they were, considering what a tactical malpractice was being put on them, and now that he's hurt, it's like, okay, you don't have that Bubby there anymore. You got to come up with some sort of adjustment, or some rotational adjustment, or else you're going home.
I feel like I'm watching March Madness with these Celtics. Like it was the same thing last year. Like they won a title because they shot the lights out of the building. And it's like that's really like you can have a great shooting team, but guys are going to go cold. Like this is, I've always knocked the Yankees lineup construction because 2 through 8 historically has been stacked with guys who will strike out 170 times, but they can get hot and run into it, and they get to the postseason. Not everyone's lined up. I think that's what we're seeing right now is they can't find the guy who's going to knock down shots from the parking lot over and over again, and that's all they've done to succeed, which is an oversimplification, but that is clearly what they hang their hat on. And so you lost Tatum, who has been probably the most reliable in that department for you. And then you're requiring Pritchard to step up, who the only time you've won a game is when he put up 23 points. The other 3 games, he's been largely useless. And so this is what I mean by they've boxed themselves in. Like, sure, they might have to make you know what? No, they can't make tactical changes because at this point, like, what are you going to do? You're talking about philosophical changes. If you're like, they can't run everything into the paint now. Like, yeah, it will probably have to go through Jaylen Brown because they have no other choice. But I have little desire to watch Jaylen Brown take 18 threes tonight.
Yeah, I think I I don't want to. I don't want to be reductive about what the Celtics did last year and have it be like they just shot the lights out. Like I think they were dynamic last year in all facets of the game, and a lot of that had to do with you had a healthy Jaylen Brown who, he's getting scoring in the mid 30s. He's having a lot of explosive plays, and I think part of that's why to go back to like what I mentioned at the top, like you know, it's easy now with all that's gone wrong and the Tatum injury too to focus on that stuff. But I just think so much of it has to do with Jaylen Brown being limited because I don't think any of the opposing teams worry about him really beating the defenders off the dribble or making these explosive plays at the rim. And so then you just load up to stop Tatum and all of a sudden the Celtics really don't have any way to score other than bombing away from three. And so, like we talk about adjustments, like one adjustment that I don't think is going to be made is suddenly doing fewer threes. I think they're going to double down even harder in this game because they have no one to get into the paint now. Like without Tatum,
They have no choice.
it's not going to be Jaylen Brown because he's too limited. He has no explosion at the rim. So I don't know. They don't have anybody to do it now. So I think if you hate watching the Celtics take threes, I feel like tonight's game is gonna maybe bring it to a new level.
They have no choice. Like this
Yeah.
is what they have to do. And I'm trying to find this now with the differences in playing time for Porzingis and Horford this year versus last year. And this isn't a knock on Horford, but the fact that they have to lean on him for 38 minutes a night for a guy who's almost 40 is absurd. Like, this was something they could have safeguarded against at the trade deadline or something like that. And now it's like, all right, so Porzingis, who has been a health concern all year long, you did nothing to guard against that. So Horford, instead of being a nice boon off your bench or a guy that you can play 28 to 30 minutes a night, he has to do everything for you. And it's just like, that's not where he's at now. So to the, fair point, Dakota, don't be reductive. But I think that's probably the big thing then, in addition to the shooting, is the fact that their presence in the paint is completely different this year versus last year.
Both these teams,
You've got Porzingis playing 15 minutes a night.
both these teams are built around scoring 3-pointers. The difference is the Celtics are majority built around the 3-point line 3-pointer. The Knicks also take a lot of deep threes, but they also have that added wrinkle of being very, very good at generating old-fashioned 3-point plays. They have Jalen Brunson, who might be the best player in the NBA at least at his position, at generating 3-pointers through and ones. And that is, I just think, a fundamental difference between the matchups, health or not, between these two teams, is that when the Celtics are not knocking down those threes, they don't have that kind of other switch that the Knicks have where, they can shoot, but if they can't shoot, they also have the ability to go down low and get the layup and one, which is a much easier shot than a 25-footer. And that to me is kind of the difference. Both teams are built around 3-pointers. They're just built around threes in different ways and with less flexibility in getting those 3 points.
Yeah, and to go back to your longstanding despise of Joe Mazzulla, I do think like he I guess to invoke a baseball phrase, like he has been a replacement level coach, like throughout this.
I think
like,
that's generous, but go ahead.
that is probably generous, but I'm just saying like like a common thing that people said about Gerard Mayo last year is what does he do? I don't know if he's good or bad. Like, what does he do? And for Joe Mazzulla, unless he really is, has some secret sauce behind the scenes on defense, which it doesn't seem to be the case. What does he do if what the Celtics boil down to is driving kick or iso ball? Um, and so other than that, it's just his sort of philosophy, his controversial philosophies on not calling timeouts, on sticking to all these processes. And so just like, again, I could do that. I'm not saying I could be an NBA coach, but I'm just saying, like, what does he do? I think last year you were able to sort of squint and be like, all right, he's really instilled this philosophy in them. The Missoula ball, like, don't be afraid of taking threes because the numbers bear it out. Like, it's going to work out for us. Just keep shooting. You can't be afraid to keep shooting. And like, it ultimately worked out for them. But it is a bit of a house of cards, obviously, once you start dealing with guys being limited or not being healthy. And then it just becomes, how does Missoula adjust? And to your point, Ben, like, I don't know, he doesn't seem to have many adjustments. And yes, he has a hand tied behind his back too now, obviously with Tatum being out. But I just don't. Yeah, like, what is his changeup? What does he go to when this starts happening? And it seems like, to your point, it is just trust the process because it'll come back around. But it doesn't seem like that's going to happen this time.
So I think back to like 28, was it 2018? It was 2018 when Kyrie was hurt and Terry Rozier went nuts for an entire postseason. And that was one of those things where it's like, somehow Brad Stevens like made that work. Obviously, Terry Rozier played a big role in it, but even though they were down somebody who was supposed to carry them, they found a way to at least be passable. I don't think they'll have enough time to prove such a thing because they're already down 3-1, but I think from this point on, and this includes next season, is where we're going to see what Missoula actually is. Because he walked into a team that was pretty well structured already. Like Dakota, in some ways, you probably could be an NBA coach in that situation because he pretty much was just
Thank you.
dropped into it. The infrastructure was already there, and you know, you
Like,
can
what
look
does
at
he
Ime
do that
Udoka.
the one? What does he do that one of the existing assistants on the Celtics bench also couldn't do?
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly valid question. I mean, that's the role. He was on the second row of the bench before he got the job. And so you look at Ime Udoka, who took the Rockets and made them, obviously hasn't panned out for them, but made them a legitimate contender in the West. And it's like, okay, you can see how someone like that is making an impact. Eric Spoelstra saw it for a while. You can even make that argument in some ways with Kenny Atkinson in Cleveland, even though they just floundered.
I think
Um,
one other point I was going to make too is that you bring up Terry Rozier, and I think the problem is, or what the Celtics perceive to be the problem is, the difference between Terry Rozier and, let's say, Avery Bradley. But the year that he had that game winner, I think it was against the Heat. Regardless, I mean, he had some good playoff games, and someone like Peyton Pritchard is, they clearly deemed Peyton Pritchard unplayable at a certain point in the game. Whereas if I remember right, Terry Rozier was kind of playing the whole way in a lot of those games, and they weren't
yeah.
they weren't so afraid to leave him out in the court. So it's like you look and you're like, maybe Peyton Pritchard could take over and he could be Jalen Brunson light, but they're just not going to play him in those. Well, now they might have to, but up until now they haven't been
Yeah.
willing to play him in those spots because of the defense. So yeah,
Well, and that goes back to like that's not a tactical adjustment. That's a personnel
right.
adjustment. So it's like why not try it? Like if he's gonna just run out essentially the same group, sans Tatum, and act like nothing's changed, it's like, well, then I hope they get their doors blown. Because they would deserve it. But all to say on the Missoula thing, like I think next year will be telling. He's going to have far less complete of a roster, especially if they use Tatum being gone for most of the year as an opportunity to reset some things. So, if he's really going to be the type of guy who's going to elevate the group around him, regardless of who he has, we're going to find out soon.
And I'll just say one more thing, and to kind of play off that, a lot of obviously the talk is about how the series is going to go without Tatum and how next year is going to go without Tatum. Like, for this series, I'm expecting them to play well tonight. Like, I think they should win tonight. I would be really. I know you thought they'll go out quietly. I'd be stunned if that happens. There are a lot of guys with a lot of pride in that team and a lot of talent, and they won a championship. Like, I think they should win this game tonight. But as far as next season, listen, and some of those the rebuilding or the contending while rebuilding, bridge years or whatever for the Celtics in the mid 2010s and stuff, they were putting together really good seasons and competitive seasons with much worse rosters than the Celtics will have next year if they run it back with everyone besides Tatum, which we'll have to see if that happens. But if it is some approximation of that, just no Tatum, like I still think the Celtics should be a good team next year. And if they aren't, I think that is, to your point, a huge referendum on Joe Mazzulla because they've made it work with far less than what they're in line to have
Yeah.
next year.
I mean, the East sucks. They're going to be in the playoffs, like they still with that team, especially if Jaylen Brown is the one he's convinced himself he is, then they should at least be like a 5 seed, like anything lower than that would be a disappointment. But again, like, this is where, and I'm of the belief that of the 4 major sports, basketball is the least impactful in terms of the coach. But if he's going to have any sort of impact on the team, then you would think that keeping that team, like his first year, he kept the team at a level no one expected him to, pretty much wire to wire, even though he had the players, people thought they'd at least stumble out of the gate and they really didn't. And so now we're going to get another test with far less star power of like, can you elevate a group that is much worse? Because we have seen that happen. Like there is recent documented history with the guy who's now the GM when he was the coach of being able to do that. So there's proof there.
It's funny you guys keep saying next season with Missoula because oddly enough, I mean the Tatum injury might have saved his job for next season. I think if they lose without Tatum being injured, there's a conversation about Missoula's job. But now, win or lose, I mean, I don't think you can, talk about firing him when your best player, one of the best players in the NBA, got hurt.
What if they get killed tonight, though? Like, that obviously, like losing the Tatum thing, but then you're talking about one game that they lost. And like, if you were entertaining that before, and they end up bowing out in Game 5, then I would think that that conversation should still be on the table.
Well, my thing is, they might know things behind the scenes that we don't in terms of when you get, real nerd basketball, whether or not Missoula is a viable option. But save all that, I think the beyond Tatum, the baked-in excuse of Brown was really limited, Porzingis was really limited, Drew Holiday probably more limited than we realize. I think that probably would have been enough to save his job too. But to your point, Ben, it might have been close, much closer than we would have imagined.
But now you're getting into big philosophical roster things because it's like, all right, Porzingis is 29, and he's had injury problems his entire career. He's probably not going to start getting any healthier. Drew Holiday's going into his age 35 season. He's probably not going to start getting any healthier. You have Horford coming off the books. You need to decide if you want to extend him so he can play into his 40s. Go ahead, Ben.
We have plenty of time to dismantle the Celtics between now and June, whether they win or lose. So let's shelve that.
Okay.
But